All right, so for today, we're on day 2 in our environmental engineering course in week 2. Still doing some course introduction material. As always, remember to sign in to the required attendance form. And for flight time, we will only have one session starting at the normal time. So make sure that you are in attendance during flight time. And that starts right at 11:30. Today, very few activities. You're going to complete the notes by watching this video and recording your notes. Part 2 of the math review exercise is due today, and also the environmental science quiz, which is a quiz over the lecture notes from the previous day. These are daily parts of the daily activities, so make sure that you're keeping up with the course and don't let this stuff pile up because it can become overwhelming very quick. So today's math review focuses on metric units. It gives you some basic breakdown of how to convert. Very easy conversions using metrics. You're just moving decimal places. Put your answers in bold. You can replace the answer with a question mark, but put it in bold. The next section is on scientific notation. It's going to be a lot easier if you read through the explanation and look at the examples that they provide. Make sure, again, to put answers in bold right next to the question. And that's the end of the review for part 2. The quiz is located in Canvas. It's a 5-question quiz. Since this is the first quiz, you get 2 attempts, but from now on it'll be just 1 attempt per quiz. So let's go ahead and dive into the lecture notes. So this is 1.2, Sustainable Development. So when you're considering sustainability, you should think about that term and what does it mean. It's different for different groups of people, but in the context of our experience, we want to allow that future generations to have the same materials that we have, and that oftentimes is in reflection of natural resources. So I want you to think about one natural resource that you could not live without. And I'm going to ask each person to share that during our Google meeting today. So indigenous people, also known as Native Americans, are often the most neglected people when it comes to resource allocation. And this has to do with history. It has to do with culture. It has to do with government sanction. There's a lot of things that are involved in this. And hopefully you've been paying attention to some of the injustices that have been occurring in different places around. This is something that happened last year and the year before at Standing Rock. There was a company that was putting in a pipeline through Native American land. It benefited only the company, and it caused some environmental destruction. At least half of the world's languages are dying because of things like this. 6,000 distinct languages will be gone forever once these people are, if they're not given some kind of hope and some kind of assistance. Homelands for indigenous people, they contain the world's greatest percentage of biodiversity, and recognizing these rights is kind of the last solid ecological safeguard that we can provide for these people. So indigenous people all around the world are affected, but I include this picture here because it's local and it affects us as United States citizens. So the three unifying concepts: sustainability, science, sound science, and stewardship. It's possible that you've partaken in some type of volunteer activity which helps out these three things, but it's all a part of policy that starts at the individual level and works all the way up through the different governmental levels. So I want to introduce you to this environmental science topic based on this story. Easter Sunday, 1722, Dutch sailors named a remote South Pacific island Easter Island. It's one of the most remote places on Earth, inhabited by the Polynesians that are living there primitively. And the sailors found these large stone statues. You might be familiar with these, which gave evidence for sophisticated civilization and culture which had vanished. And primarily the reason for that is they arrived in around 1200 AD. It's a very small island, so it's very fragile. It's isolated, dry, cold, nutrient poor, and at first it had an abundant forest, but because of its environmental conditions and because the humans that moved there started using the resources, some things started to happen. They had lots of palms and conifers and different types of sandalwood, but the inhabitants cut the trees to clear the land for agriculture. They used the trees for structural material, and then they erected these stones from a quarry and used them for creating these Easter Island stones. But the problem was they eliminated all their natural resources. And eventually had to abandon the area. There's just so few people left. By 1650, all the trees are gone. The soil washed into the sea. There's no agriculture left. Degraded soil and other resources. It became difficult to live there. People revolted against the ruling elite. The workers fought amongst themselves. And then an epidemic of starvation and disease kind of removed a lot of the people that were living there. So these consequences were no one could leave the island. They had used up all their trees and they couldn't build any more boats. The population had reduced to a few thousand by 1722. And the Easter Islanders couldn't anticipate these consequences, so they suffered because of this. And then every time they contacted the civilized world or any other people, there were disease outbreaks because they were not used to being in contact with those people. And then lots of them were captured by slave trade, smallpox hit after that, and by 1877 only 111 people remained. And the Chile government enclosed the village to try to protect it. But conditions improved. By the mid-20th century, archaeologists brought attention to the island. The stones were restored, and tourism started to develop, which kind of allowed for the import of food. But the few people that still remain, they are still suffering from unemployment and alcoholism and other major consequences. So we're going to talk about these consequences during our Google Meet today. And that's the end of the lecture series 1.2. So make sure you complete those notes and bring that information with you for our Google Meet today.